Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and thanks for joining me today on a morning walk, a beautiful morning walk here on a beautiful late winter's day, and it is absolutely gorgeous here in Rhineland-Pfalz. The sun is shining. It's going to be warm today. We've had some beautiful warm weather. I think it's going to end here pretty soon, and we're going to get hopefully a last dose of winter before it finally ends here in a few weeks. But yeah, something that's been on my mind recently, and I wanted to discuss it with you all, is so Trump is back in the White House in the United States, and Germany just had elections a couple weeks ago. So Germany's going to have a new government as well. And something that always comes up in the United States, it's always a topic of discussion, more so when Republicans are in the White House, and even more so during Trump's, tenures in the White House. Topic of conversation is European spending on defense. How much European nations spend on defense? And the argument is that European nations, and often specifically Germany, as the largest economy in the European Union, the complaint is that European nations don't spend enough on defense, and that they rely upon protection from the United States. And for that reason, Europe, Germany can prosper and can focus funding on other things, maybe such as healthcare, because they're not spending enough on defense. And so that's the typical argument from the United States perspective. So, there's a lot of complaints that European nations, our NATO partners, don't spend enough on defense. And I would say that's probably true. There's definitely some truth to that. So the NATO basically membership pledge that it's based upon a nation's economic strength, I guess, so based upon gross domestic product. And it says that each nation will spend at least 2% of its GDP on defense. And if you look at the, just a few of the nations of NATO, probably the economically most powerful ones, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, I think is a little over 2%. So I think they meet that goal. They exceed that goal by just a little bit. I think France is maybe just under it, like around 1.9% maybe. They're almost at the 2%. And then Germany is quite a bit lower at being at only 1.6% based upon what I've seen. And as the most powerful economy in Europe, you would think it might be more than that. And the United States spends a whopping 3.5% of its gross domestic product on defense. So the US spends a lot more on defense than most of our, and certainly more money in general, billions of dollars more, but significantly more from our GDP on defense than some of our NATO. Right. And recently I saw a video clip from President Trump from the Oval Office, and I don't know, I saw the video recently, I don't know how recent the video was, but I think it was within the last week, but it may have been from any time during his either one of his presidencies, when he said that, he was talking about NATO spending on defense, and he said that, I don't know if we can depend on our NATO allies if we're attacked to to be there to support us. And that's an interesting thought, because if you look at the history of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization of NATO, you look at the charter, Article 5 says that, an attack on one is an attack on all. So basically, if one member of NATO gets attacked, then you attack all members of NATO, and they will all rally to support you and defend you against attack. So in the entire history of NATO, Article 5 has been invoked one time, only once. Now, if I'm mistaken, please feel free to chime in and correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's only been invoked one time, and that was when the United States was attacked on September the 11th, 2001. And so Article 5 was invoked after the September 11 attacks, and the NATO forces rallied. They supported us. I served in Afghanistan, and during my time there, I served with German soldiers, Polish soldiers, British soldiers, French soldiers, Spanish soldiers, Italian soldiers, Dutch soldiers, Slovenian soldiers, and I'm probably missing at least one or two nations, but they were there. They were supporting us. So I'm not sure where he gets this idea that we can't depend on our NATO partners, because from my experience, they were there. And if you look at Afghanistan as a whole, it was divided into regional commands, and there were different regional commands it was divided into, and different organizations or nations had control or command, mission command, if you will, over these areas. And a few of them were pretty much totally run by partner nations. For example, the north of Afghanistan, Regional Command North, that was under command of the Germans. So basically, the United States didn't have to worry much at all about RC North. Regional Command West was under command of, I believe it was the Spanish, or was it the Italians? It was either one or the other. So again, Regional Command, we didn't have much to worry about. Now, we did have some forces there, but for the most part, these other nations worried about that. Regional Command Southwest was kind of split between the United Kingdom, and there were a lot of U.S. Marines there as well. And then the United States had, Regional Command East and Regional Command South. So, and those were probably the two most, the two busiest regions that belonged to the United States. But still, huge swaths of Afghanistan were under control of our NATO allies. So they were there supporting us. So the idea that we can't depend on them, I'm not sure where that comes from, to be honest with you. Okay, so the United States spends about 3.5% of its GDP on defense. So it far exceeds the NATO pledge of 2%. Germany falls short of that. Germany spends about 1.6% of its GDP on defense. And, I think most analysts would tell you Germany needs to spend more. They say that Germany's military equipment's in bad shape. It doesn't have enough of it, and a lot of that it does have is in pretty bad repair. Now, so Germany had elections just a couple weeks ago, and the incoming chancellor, Friedrich Merz, he's pledged to increase defense spending in Germany, and I believe he wants to increase it by, if I'm not mistaken, he wants to increase it by 1% of the GDP. So if that comes to fruition, then that would put Germany at around 2.6%, I guess. So they would be exceeding the NATO pledged amount of spending on defense. But I've always kind of thought to myself, at least for several years, what are the real numbers of defense spending? And when I say that, I mean, because I served for many years in the U.S. military, and I know that the U.S. spends a lot of money in the defense budget on things that really have little to no impact whatsoever on the defense of the United States or our allies. Things that our NATO partners either don't have to spend out of their defense money or they just choose not to. And things that I'm thinking about, the first thing that comes to mind is healthcare. And so because of the way that the healthcare systems are designed in the United States and Germany, healthcare for family members of service members in the U.S. military, billions of dollars, and also a lot of the healthcare for retirees from the U.S. military comes out of the defense budget, and we're talking billions of dollars. In the other nations of NATO, they don't have to do that because their healthcare, they have universal healthcare or some sort of social healthcare system. So healthcare for family members of service members does not come out of the defense budget. So that's billions of dollars right there. Another thing is that in the U.S. military, most of our service members are married, and every time they move, there are pretty much, the vast majority of times that they move, they are authorized to take their families with them. So the United States spends billions of dollars every year moving families of its service members all around the world, because we have people stationed, well, I say all around the world, but we have people stationed, in Europe and Asia, and of course all across the United States, which is a big area. So we spend a lot of money on moving family members, which, Germany spends, if it spends any, it spends just a small fraction of what we do on that. Operating schools, again, billions of dollars that we spend on, so when we send our service members to different countries, typically, especially if it's a country that doesn't speak English, and most of the places we have service members stationed at, English is not the first language. So we operate schools for the children of service members in those countries, and we have a few of them that are actually in the United States. And the operation of these schools comes out of the defense budget, and again, that's billions of dollars. What else? So we operate shopping. On our military bases, we have commissaries, which are grocery stores, and we also have what we call exchanges, which are like shopping malls. We operate those on our military bases, and we spend billions of dollars on those as well. There's morale, welfare, and relief programs, billions of dollars. You get the picture, right? So a lot of money comes out of the U.S. defense budget that I would argue if we didn't spend money on that, it would have little to no impact on actual defense of the nation. And maybe these are things that Elon Musk and his new Doge program will look at as far as making the Department of Defense of the United States more efficient. So, and don't get me wrong, I don't think that, if you factor in all of this stuff that's spent on things that don't really go towards defense and compare it with our NATO allies, I seriously doubt if that will make it even as far as defense spending goes. But I think I'm interested to know, and I'm going to go crunch these numbers. I think it'll be a lot closer, especially for those of our NATO partners who actually do spend over 2% of the GDP. I think it'll be pretty close. It probably won't be equal. The United States probably still spends more, but it's going to be a lot closer. At least I think it will. We'll go check it out. All right, so I'm back from my walk, my nice, lovely walk out here in the German countryside. And I came back and I looked up some of the numbers for the United States defense spending, and some of these amounts are going to be quite staggering. And now this is all open information. Anyone can just get on a computer and do an internet search and find this. None of this is like classified information or anything. It's all very much available. So the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, a huge expense for the United States Department of Defense is for health care. Not particularly health care for service members, but health care for the family members of service members and for old retirees like me. The United States spends approximately $30 billion per year out of the defense budget for health care for family members and retirees. So that's a lot of money. All right, so next on my list, moving costs. So like I said, when service members in the U.S. military move from point A to point B, most of them have families, and when they move most of the time, they take their families with them. And so that comes to about $4 billion per year for family member moving costs. Education. So the United States Department of Defense operates schools for the children of U.S. service members, a few of them in the United States, but most of them are in overseas locations in Europe and Asia. And these cost approximately $3.6 billion per year. For family housing, billions of dollars per year. Morale, welfare, and relief, almost $2 billion per year. Shopping. We operate shopping centers on our military bases for groceries, commissaries, and exchanges like shopping malls. And this cost over $1 billion per year to operate these. Retirement pay. Now this doesn't all come out of the Department of Defense budget, but some of it does. And so the grand total of retirement pay is about $70 billion per year that the U.S. spends. And for non-war-fighting infrastructure on our bases, we spend almost $70 billion for that a year as well. So a staggering sum. Now, in the end, when you factor all this in, and I say most of those costs you could remove, and it really wouldn't have much of an impact on our actual defense mission, on our actual ability to defend our country and our allies. If you take all that away, then our spending on defense drops from about 3.5%, almost a whole percent, to about 2.5%, which is just not very much more than many of our NATO allies. And now, you know, Germany doesn't spend nearly the same amount, but it does have some of the cost involved in that. So if you factor that into Germany's defense budget, their spending drops from about 1.6% to about 1.5%. So it does drop a little bit, but not that much. So when you factor this in, the U.S., instead of spending double what Germany spends, it drops down and it spends about 1% of GDP more. Now, the new incoming German government, they vowed to increase spending, and based upon what I've heard, what I've read, it seems like the German defense spending is going to go from, like it is right now, from about 1.6% to about 2.5, 2.6% of its gross domestic product spent on defense. All right, so there you go. So whenever, you know, the President of the United States says that the United States spends so much more on defense than the rest of our allies, well, I mean, we do spend more, that's for sure. I mean, we probably spend in just pure dollars, we spend, and pure money, we spend a lot more. But when you factor in the percentage of GDP, it's really not as much, the difference is not as great as it seems to be initially when you factor in all of the non-defense spending we spend out of our defense budget. All right, so I thought this was an interesting topic as I, listened to the politicians and watched the news and say, what the hell is going on in the world? Thought I would break that down for you. Hope you found this interesting. If you did, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought. What do you think about defense spending? And or just say hi. But I thought it was an interesting topic. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Tschüss.